I'd now like to bring in France 24 Soulange Mougins for a look through the day's papers. And the focus, of course, is on Super Tuesday. Soulange, thank you so much for being with us. You're kicking off with who's on top.
Yeah, and it is, as we said earlier, Joe Biden. As the Washington Post tells us, he has had a great Super Tuesday with 9 victories, the latest being Texas. And the paper says that last-minute deciders played a definitive role in finally deciding to go with Biden after candidates Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg backed out and endorsed the former vice president. Now, the cartoonist Bruce Plante of the Tulsa World has picked up on this last-minute indecision by voters. In his cartoon, you have one voter saying, instead of on second thought, on seventh thought, another wishing they had whiteout to be able to erase the previous choice, and another still in line saying the reason the voting is taking so long, there were long lines in Texas and in California as well, because voters wanted to pick the candidate that they believed could win against Donald Trump.
Of course, as you mentioned, great night for Joe Biden, with papers reporting that he is now the front runner. And the New York Post saying that a 2-man race has now very much begun.
It has indeed, according to the New York Post. On Wednesday's front page, they have a hand coming out of the grave. It is supposed to be Joe Biden's. And the paper says that thanks to this surge on Super Tuesday, Biden is a man who was left dead just a week or two ago, is now back in the race. And they say, though, it could be a tight race all the way to the convention. Now, it's fun to note on the bottom of the New York Times page, we can scroll up there so we can, I'm a little too far. We have, the Post refers to, in its article, to the $500 million that Michael Bloomberg spent in what the paper calls Bloomy's billions bomb, or his bet that he could be the centrist candidate and not Joe Biden. Now, the New York Magazine, they talk about the Bloomberg campaign, and they say it was a terrible showing by the former mayor, or a rock falling from a precipice. The former New York mayor only won in the Samoan territories. Now, the site also notes that Elizabeth Warren is living what they call her worst-case scenario, having come in third in her home state behind Biden and Sanders.
Of course, Bernie Sanders, the other very closely watched candidate. How are things looking for him this Wednesday?
Well, the LA Times tells us that they talk about the Associated Press's call that Sanders has won California, the margin to which is what is in question, because these are not definitive results. It could take weeks, possibly months, for the results to come in. And what to look at is the percentage, or the number of delegates, and that's what matters. Now, this could, though, be a major win for Sanders, the Times says. And they said the fact that AP called California is a sign that the margin may be wide in the end, that it could be between 10 and 15 points.
Let's talk about that margin of victory in California, of course, the biggest state.
As Politico tells us, California, and as we've mentioned, California has a huge number of delegates, 415 to be exact. Now, to put that into context, a candidate needs to win about 1,500 delegates to get the nomination. So it is at once the optics of a big win in a big state like California, especially because Sanders lost last time around to Hillary Clinton in the state, but it is also very much about a numbers game here. Now, the San Diego cartoonist Steve Breen from the San Diego Union Tribune, he talks about this. He talks about the division that is still going on in the party. With California, Sanders is still very much the #1 guy out front, while the party, or the establishment, all those donkeys in the background, are pulling hard behind Biden.
Very briefly, if you can tell us about the candidates coming together behind one contender there.
Well, there's a humorous piece in the Washington Post. It's by columnist Alexandra Petri, who keeps repeating to herself that Biden is great. She keeps repeating that he's the comeback kid, as a sort of way to reassure herself that this is the right candidate that could win against Donald Trump. And there is much hope there that he can do that, but it still proves to be seen.
Let's wait and see. Soulange Mougins, thank you very much for looking through the papers for us.